Spray froze on the bridge rails. A Gato-Class submarine ran high on Pacific, swells at 19 knots, smoke low and thin. The skipper never raised binoculars. He stared into one glowing circle, the SJ radar scope, where a single pip slid across green glass. Range 4,000, bearing steady. That cold whisper of electrons turned midnight into our noon. The crew trusted math over moonlight. Torpedomen set depth and gyro angle. Quartermasters traced intercepts with a grease pencil. Lookouts watched the horizon anyway, their eyes watering in the wind, knowing the truth. The set would see first. Our side built a new rhythm. Detect, close, strike, vanish. The SJ set, a 10-centimeter microwave radar, pulled steel from black water miles away and held it steady when eyes would fail. Skippers attacked on the surface, where boats were fastest and hardest to see. Deck crews lashed down lines and let speed do the hiding. Early Mark 14 torpedoes lied about depth and contact, but brains beat defects while the fixes were forged and tested under fire. Men learned, shared, and sailed again. A radioman named Novak whispered, "2 more pips." The skipper answered, "We're not done." The boat leaned into a turn, bow knifing clean water, wake lost in chop. The sea answered with a muffled boom and a tower of steam. A POW's diary from Luzon caught the echo. No fuel again. Convoy late. Guards angry. Rumor says submarines. He wrote that one missing tanker meant fewer blows and an extra scoop of rice. He did not know the boat's name. He thanked anyone who made the sea dangerous. That is how invisible victories feel far-away metal saving nearby flesh. In camps across the islands, men learned to read the quiet, a week without trucks, thinner soup, less shouting, and a whisper that the hunters in the dark were American. Japanese lookouts had once owned the dark. Now darkness betrayed them. Radar let Americans draw lines only we could see and move along them with machine calm. Escorts fired starshell and chased ghosts. Signalmen tapped out warnings no one could answer with eyes alone. Captain Tamechi Hara, a master of night fighting, later admitted the pivot without drama. The miraculous development of electronic weapons broke their edge. His words read like a weather report after the storm had already hit, plain and cold and inarguable. The last sight from the bridge was a pale wake curling off the bow as the boat settled on a new course. Fresh contacts blooming, bearings steady, American hands on a scope that never blinked. The Pacific, once a cover, became a canvas we could read in the dark and paint with fire. This was the first revelation. We weaponized the night, and louder truths were coming, stacked like torpedoes in the forward room. Imagine a campus of sailors, barely 2 out of every 100 in the Navy, sent alone into a planet-sized ocean. That small tribe, the Silent Service, strangled an island empire built on ships. Logbooks and loss lists tell the scale. Millions of tons of tankers and freighters gone, fuel short, rice scarce, war plans cancelled for want of gasoline. American submarines sank more than half of Japan's merchant tonnage and a heavy share of her fighting ships. The numbers sound unreal until you picture the work. Surface approaches at night. SJ radar holding a convoy like a thread, spreads fired from 10 torpedo tubes, and long, low silhouettes racing away in the troughs. Every ship that never arrived meant one less guard and one more bowl of rice. A former Allied POW remembered, voice flat but grateful. The boats weren't many, but they were relentless. Gato-class hulls carried range of roughly 11,000 miles at 10 knots, and they used it without apology. They prowled the Formosa Strait, Bungo Swedo, the Luzon routes, the Sea of Japan itself. They learned from every patrol, sent hard lessons home, and read new guidance before the paint dried on the pier. Factory. Floors in the States fed them parts and fixes on a timetable that looked like witchcraft. Radars upgraded, exploders corrected, scopes reworked, engines tuned. Even Japanese officers noticed the quick turn of American learning. Reports speak of escorts worn thin and convoys arriving light or not at all. By mid-1943, the pattern hardened. Our submariners ran on the surface at night because speed and surprise kept them alive, and radar kept them right. They hit tankers first, then freighters, then anything that kept the war moving. The Pacific was too large to defend, and just small enough to hunt. Human names carry the math. Tang, Barb, Wahoo, Harder, O'Kane, Flucky, Morton, Dealey. Crews with calloused hands turned pips into wreckage, and wreckage into strategy. A Japanese prisoner in 1945 told an American chaplain, "We could not feed men or float planes. We were empty before we were beaten." The silent service paid for that confession. 52 United States submarines never came back. Over 3,000 families kept a Blue Star banner that never turned to gold because there was no grave to visit. The ledger reads like a paradox. The smallest community carried the heaviest share. Freedom in the Pacific did not come cheap, but it came fast because a few thousand men made the ocean a hostile workplace for tyranny. Less than 2% throttled the empire's throat. The next chapter answers the question that hung over every black horizon. How did we find steel in the dark in the first place? And why did the enemy fail to see us coming? How do you fight a hunter you cannot see? How do you plot a safe course when the enemy can find steel in black water and draw a straight line to your heart? Those were the questions Japanese convoy commanders did not ask loudly enough. The old answer was doctrine. Darkness hides ships, sharp eyes and nerve keep them safe. The new answer rode in our conning towers. The SJ surface, search radar 10-centimeter waves born in labs, and rushed to sea in 1942 and 1943, made the night a living map. It did not blink. It did not tire. It put precise range and bearing on a screen small enough to fit a cramped control room. And it did it again every sweep. Skippers stopped guessing. They attacked on the surface, fast and silent, where lookouts missed them and speed bought life. Mark 14 torpedoes would soon be corrected. Even before the full cure, the radar turned poor odds into knife fights we chose. Target bearing 090, range decreasing, a helmsman repeated, knuckles white on the wheel. Inside the escort screen, the boat threaded through columns like a thief in a crowd, trusting numbers more than sky. Japanese doctrine built on eyes and courage broke against electronics and method. Captain Tamichi Hara dated the flip with a wince. Starting in mid-1943, they lost supremacy at night because Allied scientific gear kept finding them. Signalman wrote it plainer. We could see nothing, yet radar, equipped scouts and ships tracked them step by step. A British PO in Singapore heard the same truth through hunger. They talk of ships lost. We smell empty depots. He mapped his hope to the rumour mill, no fuel for trucks, thinner rice, guards who cursed the sea. American boats did not look heroic in daylight. They looked low, chipped, salt-streaked. But at 2 a.m, with diesels rumbling and scopes dry, they were laboratories of courage. The SJ dish nodded, the plot thickened, and a captain chose angles the enemy could not even imagine. Escorts fired star shell and illuminated nothing. Shot by shot, convoy confidence drained away. If a single tool could hold the night open, a culture had to keep it honest. Our culture did. We wrote reports, admitted flaws, shared fixes, and sailed back out. The ocean felt different because we made it different. The old night, Japan's night, was over. The new night answered to American hands. Now watch what happens when we fix the torpedo, scale the doctrine, and turn radar contact into certainty and wreckage on demand. The Fairbanks Morse diesels gave 20 knots when weather cooperated, and that speed turned bearing lines into firing positions. By 1943, some patrols ran in coordinated wolf packs, each boat painting the same target on its scope and relaying angles by radio code. The SJ antenna sat forward of the periscope shears like a dish, but it might as well have been a lighthouse only we could see. Out there in the black, size did not win. Skill, signal, and steel nerves did. 3 perfect tracks ran straight and true and failed. Early war torpedoes ran too deep, broke on contact, or detonated at the wrong moment. American skippers sent angry patrol reports. and then rolled up their sleeves. They cut open exploders, tested firing pins, shimmed springs, and proved the truth on ranges and in combat. By late 1943, the fixes stuck: corrected running depth, hardened contact pistols, and the magnetic feature left off when it lied. Now the SJ radar's gift, a clean night approach, met torpedoes that did what the dial said. The change was visible in flames and measured in tonnage. Spreads bit, convoys vanished. Crews believed again. "We're going back in," a torpedoman told his mate on a rain-soaked bridge. Now they work. The engineering chain at home moved like a living thing, labs to fleet, fleet to labs. No ego spared, no delay forgiven. That cycle was an American weapon by itself, built of honesty and speed. On the surface side of the war, August 6-7, 1943 wrote a lesson in big letters. Vela Gulf. 6 U.S. destroyers used radar to slip in, launch torpedoes, and sink 3 Japanese destroyers without a scratch. It was night, it was planned, and it worked because electronics gave certainty and commanders were trusted to act. The same culture lived in the submarines. Close unseen, hit hard, leave clean. A Japanese sailor pulled from the water after a tanker kill said through chattering teeth, "We never saw them. The sea just broke." He was not weak. His world had changed. Escorts that once trusted star shell now turned and found only holes in darkness. Hydrophones murmured. Radars on escorts were too few or too crude, and speed belonged to the hunter. The Mark 14's shame turned to pride as corrected runs shattered engine rooms and snapped keels. Captain Tamechi Hara would later write plainly that Allied electronic weapons and air power took the night away. Our torpedo fix made that theft permanent. American industry printed parts like a press prints headlines, and the fleet read them aloud in fire. A Dutch POW on Java felt the proof in his stomach. The guards lost meat first, then cigarettes, then boots. Someone at sea was cutting the rope. The boat that saved him did not know his name. It only knew the range, the bearing, and the rule: press the attack. With torpedoes honest and radar steady, the silent service became a vice on an empire's throat and tightened with every patrol. In shipyards from Mare Island to Portsmouth, machinists worked double shifts, blueprints smudged with oil and coffee. They signed inside masts and fairings, small names for big changes that reached all the way to the Bungo Swedo at 2 a.m. The Gulf held its breath. 6 American destroyers idled in black water, radars sweeping like silent lighthouses. At 23:33, their scopes painted pips that were not waves. Torpedo crews snapped to stations. Commanders gave calm bearings and 2 words: stand by. Then, fire. The night tore open. 3 Japanese destroyers died in minutes at Vela Gulf, 6-7 August 1943, and our force took no hits. That wasn't luck. It was radar plus training, doctrine written in checklists, and officers trusted to fight without big-gun babysitters. The same culture lived in the submarines: close unseen, hit hard, leave clean. We felt the shock through the deck like a hammer. A signalman said, later eyes wide, voice soft with awe. American ships learned to use island background to mask themselves, to hold contact when land clutter fooled old sets, to time the perfect turn. The ocean became a map measured in seconds and yards. Japanese captains, once masters of night, met an enemy that drew lines in darkness and moved along them with machine calm. Hara would later write that radar let the enemy use the darkness as a perfect cloak and attack at will. That sentence reads like a verdict. A captured coxswain from a torpedo boat said, "We fired at light and hit smoke. They fired at nothing and hit ships." He was not insulting his crew. He was describing a physics problem rearranged by American science. Back in the States, teachers turned into engineers. Engineers turned into chiefs. Chiefs turned young sailors into calm killers of ships. A destroyer division could now do in minutes what used to take cruisers and luck. Every success bled into the submarines' 2 shared tables, shared ideas, shared timing. When a radar contact appeared at night, A US skipper no longer asked, "Can we find them?" He asked, "How do we stack the angles?" The answer lived in quiet hands, on a scope, and in torpedo rooms that moved like orchestras. An Australian POW in Rabaul later wrote that guards flinched at thunder far out to sea, then rationed lantern oil as if light itself had grown scarce. Fear travels faster than ships when convoys fail to arrive. Vella Gulf was proof, not exception. Radar, doctrine, and delegation scaled up across the fleet. The whisper grew into policy, then into pattern, then into ruin for anyone betting on the old night. The ships slid past Kolombangara's shadow like blades in a sheath, using the island to blind enemy lookouts and hide their own wakes. Plots were crisp, voice circuits calm, and the torpedo tracks ran true because training had burned the steps into muscle and memory. On chart tables, grease pencil lines met at right angles. That meant hits, not hopes, and young officers learned that science plus courage beats mystique every time. When did Japan lose the night for good? What flipped a proud doctrine into a string of funerals and burning wakes in a single season? Hara marked the date like a scar. Starting in mid-1943, supremacy at night slipped away under the weight of Allied scientific gear and relentless air. The timing matches the ledger. By that summer, SJ radar sat on American subs across the Pacific. Torpedo fixes reached the boats. Air patrols and codebreakers tightened the noose, pushing convoys onto routes we expected at hours we preferred. Losses spiked even as escorts multiplied. The ocean did not change. Our tools and our speed did. Signals clear, range closing. A helmsman repeated, words steady as heartbeat in the red light of the control room. Skippers ran at night on the surface because that brought speed, surprise, and better firing angles, and radar kept them honest when clouds smothered stars. Escorts turned to chase phantoms and exposed their flanks. Tankers burned and took whole operations with them. No fuel, no sortie, no hope. On shore, Japanese route planners drew longer paths and then erased them after fresh sinkings. The math beat them. Free debate and rapid repair gave our side time they couldn't steal back. POWs felt the turn in their bones. A lean American in Davao wrote, "Soup thin, trucks silent, guards whisper about a convoy that did not come." A British prisoner in Burma tallied the days between rice deliveries and started to believe in men he would never meet. Across camps, scarcity replaced swagger. At sea, the change was visible in how calmly our crews worked in foul weather. Fairbanks Morse diesels hammered ahead, radar dishes nodded, plots thickened, and attack angles stacked like clean geometry. Escorts fought bravely. They laid smoke, ran hard and fired star shell until barrels glowed, but radar did not care about nerves. It rewarded process. It punished delay. Hara's later admission that electronic weapons flipped the night reads like a confession made on the quarterdeck after taps. It also reads like mercy for his own men, because the facts would not bend. The sea around the Philippines and the Solomon Islands turned into a school run by Americans who graded themselves after every patrol and published the answers. By autumn, the pattern was ruthless. Convoys sailed with more escorts and arrived with fewer ships. The question of whether darkness could still protect Japan had an answer written in steam and oil across the water. No. The next chapters widen the lens. They count what that answer did to an empire's lifeline and show why a small brotherhood could change strategy for a nation of millions. In late nights on the bridge, coffee steamed under a rag against the wind, and young officers learned to trust a green glow more than moonlight. They learned that freedom rides on checklists, and that bravery counts double when it is measured and repeatable. Steel ribs hummed as the Pacific rolled under the bow of USS Barb, SS 220. She was a Gato-Class bruiser with 10 21-inch tubes, 4 Fairbanks Morse diesels for speed, and enough fuel to roam roughly 11,000 nautical miles at cruising power. In her shears sat the edge that flipped the night. The SJ surface, search radar, a 10-centimeter set that dragged steel out of black water and held it while a quartermaster drew a firing triangle in grease pencil. Commander Eugene B. Fluckey told his men, "We don't have problems, only solutions," and then proved it by attacking convoys on the surface at 30 knots over the ground when current and wind lined up. The bow sliced spray, the scope glowed green, bearings steadied. Barb slid through the Formosa Strait, Luzon routes, and along the Sakhalin coast with the confidence of a street cop who knows every alley. At night the crew smelled diesel and wet canvas and coffee under a rag to keep it warm. The boatswain whispered to the bridge, 2 pips starboard. The skipper said, "Stand by 3. Fish spread." Torpedoes ran hot, straight and normal. The ocean answered with a thud in the hull and a pillar of steam. Later in 1945, Barb crept to Hokkaido's coast, landed a tiny party with a magnetic charge, and blew a freight train sky high, the only ground combat on the Japanese home islands led by a U.S. submarine crew. But the core power was simpler. Range, radar, and nerve turned a cargo-eating boat into a traveling catastrophe for an island empire. Japanese destroyer captains, once proud lords of darkness, found their searchlights painting empty water while American pips moved like chess pieces. A rescued Japanese sailor gasped to a translator, "We never saw the ship. The sea just opened." He wasn't ashamed. He was describing physics America bent to its will. Barb's attack records show nights when the target screen looked like a star field. Every light a tanker, every light a chance to cut muscle from the war. Fluckey's men slept with life jackets as pillows and boots within reach. Orders were short, grips sure. Routines drilled until hands moved on their own. The crew lived on Spam, bread and nerves, and they laughed anyway because laughter keeps you human in steel tubes. Each patrol felt like an equation solved in the rain. Range, bearing, speed, radar, optics, wake, courage, discipline, trust. Add them and you get wreckage and oil fires in the distance and fewer bullets for a guard on land. That is how a long-legged American machine, driven by citizen sailors, made the night carry our name. A single tanker went down off Luzon, and the real damage never touched water. Factories without oil, airfields without avgas, depots with rice measured in spoons. Multiply that by thousands and you reach the unimaginable Japan's merchant marine collapsed under a handful of American boats. U.S. submarines sank on the order of 5 million tons of Japanese shipping, more than half of the empire's merchant losses, while also ambushing capital ships when fate placed them in the crosshairs. The Tokyo Express destroyers, once proud for night fighting, hauled sacks of rice and drums of fuel, burning precious fuel to move fuel because freighters died faster than Tokyo could build them. At Bougainville and Rabaul, sailors nicknamed runs Aunt Runs because they carried crumbs to hungry garrisons. On shore, Allied POWs learned to count sinkings by the soup. Thin soup meant a convoy never arrived. One British prisoner in Burma wrote, "We heard thunder far out to sea. 2 weeks later the guards' boots cracked and their tempers followed." A Dutch internee on Java said, "Someone at sea is cutting the rope." After the meat ration vanished and even the guards smoked dry leaves. Look at names and dates and you can trace the choke. Shokaku sunk by USS Kavala, Taiho by USS Albacore, Shinano by USS Archerfish, Congo by USS Celian, Maya by USS Dace. Each kill was a hole in Japan's war plan, but the everyday killing of freighters was the slow blade. The empire's geography, long, thin, ocean-bound, turned into a weakness because free people with tools made the ocean hostile on schedule. American radar fed bearings into torpedo rooms. American factories fed parts into shipyards. American skippers fed courage into the gap between sloppy chance and repeatable success. Captain Tamechi Hara, no enemy of excuses, admitted that Allied electronic weapons took the night away. After mid-1943, convoys sailed as if under judgment. Japanese escorts laid smoke and fired starshell, but radar plotted through it and attacks came at 20 knots from nowhere. "We could not feed men or float planes," a Japanese officer told an interrogator in 1945. "We were empty before we were beaten." That sentence is the definition of a throttle. It is also a measure of character, because it happened not by terror alone, but by relentless work, checklists, drills, upgrades, and patrol reports that told the truth even when it stung. America did not just outshoot, it fixed, shared, and outpaced. The vice tightened each month until islands with flags became islands with hunger, and the night sea wrote the verdict in foam and flame. Start in a lab with a warm vacuum tube and a note from Britain's TISAD mission about cavity magnetrons. Hop to a stateside plant where machinists mill waveguides. End in a subs shears, where an SJ set hums at sea within months. That speed from idea to ocean was the American advantage. Mare Island, Portsmouth, electric boat, Manitowoc, yards that could cut steel, pull a mast, wire a radar, and sail the boat on the same tide. Liberty ships slid down ways in weeks. A Kaiser yard built one in under 5 days. Willow Run pushed out a B-24 roughly every hour at its peak. Those headlines mattered to submariners because they meant spare parts on time, new sets, better scopes, and faster repairs after hard depth charge hunts. An electrician's mate from Ohio could learn a new radar alignment in a day because the manual was clear and the chief's patient. A commander from Kansas could argue a torpedo fix with an ordnance captain from Pennsylvania, and both would win because truth beat rank. That is a culture, and it is a weapon. We don't have problems, only solutions, Flucky liked to say, but hundreds of officers lived it. O'Kane on USS Tang, Morton on USS Wahoo, Dealey on USS Harder, Street on USS Tirante, men trusted to improvise at midnight when the rulebook ran out. The enemy respected courage. What shocked them was transparency. Our boats wrote frank patrol reports that tore into their own mistakes, and the fleet published them so the next crew would not bleed the same way. That is not cold efficiency, it is national character. A machinist at Mare Island scrawled his name inside a radar mast, then hustled home to a bait Tate 2 night shift at a parts plant. He would never see the Formosa Strait, but his signature would. On a winter pier, a chief radioman showed a 19-year-old how to sweep land clutter and hold a tiny pip against a bright island. In the Philippines, a POW tasted an extra ladle of rice and did not know he was eating the output of a democracy. Arguments in boardrooms, overtime in yards, trains of spares, and a captain trusted to try a new approach on a dark sea. Only a free people moves like this, an Australian observer wrote after touring US yards. He wasn't flattering, he was plotting velocity. When you fit science to factories and hand both to citizens in uniform, the night itself starts taking orders. That is how an idea becomes a convoy kill list, and how a value tell the truth and make it better becomes a weapon no admiral can outrun. Say their names and feel the room settle. Wahoo, Tang, Harder, Gudgeon, Grunion, Pickerel, Shark, Dorado, 50, 2 US submarines that never came home. The silent service suffered the highest casualty rate of any American arm in the war, roughly 3,500 dead, and many have no grave but salt and pressure. USS Harder, hit him harder, wrote a legend in 1944. 6 destroyers sunk or crippled across her patrols, then died under depth charges off Dassel Bay on 24 August. Commander Samuel D. Dealey earned the Medal of Honor for a patrol that read like fiction. Fishermen still talk about faint thumps in the deep. In 2024, searchers found Harder's hull upright in the dark, a steel sepulchre, and a final coordinate for families who had only letters. USS Tang, under Commander Richard H. O'Kane, became a synonym for audacity, then was lost when a circular running torpedo struck her stern. O'Kane survived Japanese captivity and came home with a Medal of Honor and a voice that never forgot the quiet before fire. A former Japanese guard told an interviewer, "Your men went into the sea again and again. We respected that. Respect does not fill chairs at tables. It does not fix the ache of a blue star that stayed blue. In control rooms, red lights glowed on pale faces while depth charges climbed the ladder of sound. Men counted seconds the way some men count prayers. Bolts squealed. Dust sifted. A chief whispered, "Hold her steady. That human cost is the other half of the miracle, because technology without people is scrap." Sailors took the torpedo scandal on the chin and kept fighting until the fixes stuck. They learned new radar tricks, ran battle surface at night to gain speed, and came back with pages of notes to make the next crew faster and safer. A British POW remembered hearing church bells ring in Manila the day a convoy did not arrive, and guards went quiet. Somewhere out past the horizon, a US boat breathed again after a close pattern of charges. The crew wiped oil from faces, checked gauges, and set up to shoot the counter-attacking escort. That was the price of owning the night. Terror taken in small bites, courage repeated until it became routine. We paid it. We kept paying it. And because we did, men with empty bowls on land lived to fill them again. Imagine a small fraternity of citizens sending home a ledger that reads like myth. 8 Japanese aircraft carriers, sunk by US. Submarines Taiho, Shokaku, Shinano among them, plus a battleship, cruisers, and a city of freighters and tankers. Add millions of tons of cargo erased, and whole operations cancelled for lack of fuel. Less than 2% of the Navy forced an empire to eat its seed corn. This is not bravado, it is arithmetic that stings. USS Archerfish tracked the giant carrier Shinano by night, held her on radar, and planted torpedoes that turned a secret ship into a memory before she fired a plane. USS Kavala waited like a patient hunter and shredded Shokaku in the Philippine Sea. USS Celian sent the battlecruiser-borne battleship Congo down in the Taiwan Strait. USS Data and USS Dace smashed Otago and Maya in Surigao approaches, removing teeth the enemy could not regrow. Each name is a receipt. Meanwhile, the everyday grind freighters off Formosa, tankers near Hainan, Maros off Kyushu was the slow murder of a war economy. Japanese staff diaries fill with phrases like expedient measures and restricted allocations, polite words for hunger and empty drums. A captured logistics officer said, "We began to plan with losses as a constant, which is another way to say, we lost." On the American side, the statistics feel unreal until you put faces on them. A torpedoman in Tang remembered the smell of hot oil and the metallic taste in the mouth when a fish left the tube. An electrician on Barb recalled wiping salt from a radar scope with a sleeve and seeing the pip steady and bright where a ship should never have been. Ordinary people did this extraordinary math. "We thought in bearings," a quartermaster joked, "and dreamed in wakes. That is the secret: dreams turned into procedures, turned into victories. The enemy was brave and skilled. They had the superb Type 93 oxygen torpedo and night habits honed in the slot. But they did not have a system that punished lies and rewarded fixes. We did. And when you scale a culture like that across shipyards, labs, and crews, you get the kind of scoreboard that sounds like boasting until you open the archives and see the stamps. Picture a black horizon east of Kyushu. A Gato runs high, decks slick, bow-knifing foam. The skipper's face glows in red light as the SJ antenna nods above. Range 3,000. Bearing steady. Torpedoes slide forward. Somewhere in the convoy, a lookout squints at darkness and sees only night. Then wakes boil white and steam roars. That is what happens when a free people decide to make the dark tell the truth. By early 1943, American subs carried radar that turned invisibility into an American myth. By late 1943, torpedoes obeyed their dials. By 1944, coordinated attacks and shared lessons made convoy slaughter a process, not a prayer. Less than 2% of the Navy strangled an empire's lifeline with roughly 5 million tons of shipping sent down, and they did it with a casualty rate that would have broken a colder nation. A Japanese captain later said, "We were empty before we were beaten." A British POW said, "I gained hope on days when the trucks did not come." Those sentences belong together. They describe the same engine. Citizen sailors, honest engineering, rapid industry, trust at the edge. America proved that values truth, speed, generosity, delegation are combat multipliers. We did not just field gadgets. We built a culture that makes gadgets matter. We argued about bad torpedoes and fixed them. We took British science and made American production. We gave skippers freedom because responsibility makes men grow. We even showed mercy in victory. POWs in US camps gained weight and tasted ice cream, while we fought men who starved their prisoners. That contrast is not cute. It is power. It tells the world what kind of nation can stare into a radar scope at night and still hold a moral compass by day. The ocean learned to whisper in a language made of bearings and conscience. It whispered to a Gato's bridge and to a hungry prisoner behind razor wire, "Hold on." And when the sun rose on 1945, the numbers on the board looked impossible. Carriers and cruisers erased by shadows, tankers gone like spilled light, islands isolated into silence. We did that. We paid for it in steel and names and folded flags. We did it anyway because free people fight with brains and hands and hearts at the same time. That is how America turned night into a weapon and wrote freedom in wakes across the biggest ocean on Earth.